Tupper, one of the many hats that a MEG board wears is that sometimes a MEG board might be convened to respond to a really difficult situation. In other words, a problem that is being experienced with a pastor or a problem that's being experienced at a specific local church. So in a very general sense, we call this a "we have a situation" interview. So can you talk to us a little bit about what might initiate or who might be called in for a "we have a situation" interview?
The person that would be called in is going to be a pastor. It could be a staff pastor or a senior pastor at a church. Being called in because there could be a variety of reasons. There could have been a report of a particular issue in their marriage or in their ministry that was a particular concern to conference leadership. So they may be called in because the MEG board wants to get clarification about what happened, who was involved, and to really seek out the truth about what might have happened in those situations. We also want to make sure, I think that it's clear to the candidate or the interviewee coming in that this isn't a disciplinary, top-down, the MEG board's angry with you that this happened. But we're calling in the pastor because a situation has come up that the MEG board has been made very aware of on a very small scale. And we want to have the interaction with the pastor. We want the pastor's perspective on the events that have occurred. And we don't want our pastors to feel like if there's perhaps a disagreement between the local board and the pastor about how ministry should be done or how money should be spent, if the church board has reached out to the superintendent, we want to make sure that we're able to help guide the pastor through the experience and wisdom of godly leaders, both laity and clergy that sit on the MEG board, about how to interact and move forward in those interactions.
I mean, it's one of the strengths of how our MEG boards are designed, that we have sitting at the table people who are in a pastoral role and people who are lay leaders in their church, so that they can look at circumstances as clergy and as laity. So you're saying that when a pastor is brought in for "we have a situation" interview, it's not necessarily a disciplinary situation, but it could be a disciplinary situation. What kinds of reasons might a superintendent say to a pastor, "you need to go meet with the MEG board," and it would be perhaps a corrective interview with the pastor?
Yeah, so the pastor could have been teaching in a sermon about some issues. They could be teaching something that is not a area of nuance within our denomination, but let's say they taught about the deity of Christ not being God, or
that'll get you a MEG board interview, won't it?
Yeah. Or maybe they were teaching about through some of Paul's letters, and then they were teaching about election, and they had a more Calvinist, a hardline Calvinist view that they were teaching. Superintendent may say, we want to review what's going on. We want to make sure that we're still, your views still line up and are friendly, that you're still willing to be a part of our network, and make sure that things are in those kind of situations.
So a theological issue that might raise the question about this person being a match for our network could precipitate that kind of interview. Are there other kinds of issues that might result in a pastor being brought in for "we have a situation" interview?
Yeah, so one of the beautiful things about the Free Methodist Church is from all levels that they narrow in. And so every pastor who's in a conference is also part of a district. And those districts have district leaders, and they meet generally once a month. And the opportunity at those district meetings they're confidential meetings where a pastor can share about issues in their ministry or in their family. But the district leader is also a person that works with our superintendents to say, we may want to interview a pastor. And so if a pastor shares at the district meeting about a marriage struggle, maybe either an inappropriate relationship with a church member that's not their spouse, or a particular struggle that they're having in their marriage, that district leader may feel compelled to have the conversation with the superintendent and have the MEG board invite that pastor in for further conversation about what's going on in their marriage and how those things are going.
I mean, I think those are painful but useful illustrations of what might happen. There also might be conflicts with church boards being in opposition, which you've kind of pointed to as well. So what might be outcomes from a We Have a Situation interview?
Yeah, so the first thing that's going to be really brought up in the interview is the understanding of what's going on. Yeah. And so the MEG board is going to start from this question of, tell us the story about what's going on with X situation. And from there, the interview will move through, and there really could be any number of conclusions, outcomes from that interview. Most likely, any outcome that would be disciplinary would not come just directly down from the MEG, but there would be follow-up conversation between the regional MEG chair and the regional superintendent or conference superintendent. A lot of times there would be follow-up, maybe a follow-up interview or additional conversation or recommendations to attend some classes. We may recommend the pastor and their spouse attend marriage therapy, depending on the issue. There may be even a recommendation that the pastor, and if it's a church board conflict, that the superintendent or a member of the MEG board sit in with the pastor on a board interview and let that MEG member or the superintendent guide a conversation to help repair the relationship between the pastor and the board from the conference. Sometimes just having that outside person step into the conflict can help ease some of the frustrations and can relieve some of the pressure and allow people to have a mutual understanding.
So there's a dimension of how you approach this that has to do with the priority of restoration, the priority of reconciliation. It's a goal to be redemptive. I appreciate all of what you're saying there. So we say in our organization that part of church health is the right kind of outside oversight. That there are times that pastors and or churches go through difficult times, and having a team of godly, objective leaders from outside the local church be able to step into the situation with supportiveness, but also with authority. Yeah. That the proper exercise of that authority can take a situation and move it in a very positive direction. So this is one of those things where a MEG board might be called on short notice to intervene. Yeah. Type of thing. How might that happen? How might a MEG board become aware that there's a situation and there needs to be 2 days from now, say, an interview type of thing? How might that happen? Yeah,
oftentimes it sources with a phone call from the conference superintendent or regional superintendent to the regional MEG chair with a very high-level debrief of the situation that's occurred. Because we want our interviewee to speak into the situation as well. Okay. And so one of the superintendents may contact the regional chair and say, "There's a situation with a pastor. There's an issue happening in their marriage, and we really need to have a MEG board come in and interact with that pastor about that and gather some more details. Find out from the pastor what's going on." It also is a situation to be fair to the pastor. There may be a false accusation or allegation from a church member or board member, and we want to enter this conversation with a heart and an ear to understand what's happening. We got to keep in mind the pastor coming into this interview is probably going to have a high level of anxiety and probably going to be a little bit tense and nervous because they're interviewing with their MEG board about this. And so it's going to be important that we make sure our interview setting and our table and our room are appropriate to bring ease to that pastor. And we enter it and we affirm to that pastor that we love them that we want to engage with them, we want to help them, we want what's best for them, and we want them to succeed where God's calling them to serve.
Well said. So if a MEG board invites a pastor to come for a we have a situation interview, is it optional for the pastor to come or not come?
So it is not. So our as an elder in the Free Methodist Church, both of us are under the authority of the Ministerial Education and Guidance Boards. And so when a board calls a pastor or a conference ministerial candidate and says we need an interview, there needs to be understanding from the MEG board about scheduling and making it appropriate and not hard for the candidate to have the interview. They don't really have a choice to say, no, I don't want to be interviewed by you. The MEG board is the overseeing body of those pastors.
It's a good perspective, and you talked about the anxiety that a pastor might feel, but the goal is to the MEG board to make this as safe as possible. So maybe you can make a few final comments about confidentiality and boundaries with the information you learn.
Yeah. So one of the phrases that I've heard used is with as few people as possible and as quickly as possible. Yeah. And so if a pastor's having an issue with their marriage, you don't want to necessarily convene a full 12-person MEG board. You may want to convene one of your more experienced lay members or one or two of your more experienced clergy members to have that meeting with the pastor. It's important to affirm to that pastor at the beginning of the interview that nothing they say is going to be recorded, that nothing they say about their marriage or where they say about their church conflict will be recorded in detail in the minutes of the meeting, and that pastor can expect that the members of the MEG board to retain confidentiality as they approach that interview. And by doing that up front with the candidate at every We Have a Situation interview, you'll have a more open pastor who's going to say, they're going to give more detail and be more free.
Yeah. Well, I think you provided really good insight here. It's possible to be a MEG board member for years and not be called in We Have a Situation interview, or it's possible that in the course of a conference year, you have a number of pretty delicate situations you need to handle. So thank you, Tupper. I think this has been good, and there's information in our interview guide to give some more detail about how to approach this kind of interview. Thanks a lot.